Hello and welcome to this interview. Today we are very pleased to have Penny onto the channel to talk about how it's like studying history at the University of Oxford. She's a third-year student at Balliol College and we can't wait to talk to her about her experiences. How are you, Penny?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
To get started off with this interview, you're the first Cypriot to come on to our channel. So tell us a bit more about how it was to experience the change from Cyprus all the way to Oxford, because I assume that's quite a big jump.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think moving in general is a bit of a challenge, but I think moving from Cyprus was a bit of an extra bit of a challenge because the undergraduate population is so small. So if you're looking for that sense of community, it's really hard to kind of find it because Oxford has a lot of religious-based societies or kind of national or ethnic-based societies, but there are, I think, 5 undergraduates in Oxford, including me. So it was a bit hard, and I think that the way I went about it was that it's all about putting yourself out there, because especially in the first term, everyone is still adjusting. I think even people who live in Oxford are still adjusting to studying at Oxford. So it's about understanding that you need to give yourself that, let's say 1 term to try to figure things out. But even if you haven't figured out by the end of the term, the whole university experience is still about kind of figuring things out. So what I did is, you put yourself out there, you try to, meet people, go to fairs, go to subject society events or university society events. I was considering doing some debating. I didn't do it in year 1 because I felt that I couldn't manage my workload. But I did it in my second year, and I've met so many great people and I've made so many great friends. So it's all about, putting yourself out there and giving yourself the time to kind of figure things out.
What would you say is the biggest jump from Cyprus to Oxford? Was it more on an academic level, I guess, the jump from high school to university? Was it kind of the climate? I mean, coming from Hong Kong, UK weather is completely mad. But what was that kind of biggest thing which stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I was sick for a large component because obviously the climate is different, but it didn't really bother me. I felt, it's part of the experience. But for me, it was definitely the academics, just because I thought that I will be expected to, perform like I'm meant to perform at finals in my first week, which is not the case. And I think my tutors did a really good job at kind of clarifying that. But I still had that expectation of myself, and I shouldn't. But I spent a lot of time trying to kind of write the perfect essay or like read more books, but I wasn't doing it strategically. So I think that was that kind of the biggest challenge for me, was the academic transition from high school to university.
And can you perhaps give us some advice about how you could manage that expectation and adapt to that kind of the step up from high school to university? Because of course, going to Oxford, most people here are extremely competitive and kind of have that mindset where we demand a lot from ourselves. So how do you really manage those demands to be pushing yourself, but also not being crazy in that regard?
Yeah, it sounds a bit weird because as you said, a lot of people are competitive, but a lot of people are not competitive with others, they're competitive with themselves.
Yeah.
So I think if you really kind of put yourself out there when it comes to working with your tutor partner, I really regret not doing it, especially in my first term. And we started kind of doing it during our exams preparation in year 1, and I could see a significant difference because we used to do the same topics, but we didn't really kind of talk to each other. You don't have to write the same essay, but talking through something, it kind of really helps, not just academically, but also kind of in managing that expectation. Because I'm talking to my tude partner 1 year after that kind of academic year passed, which was kind of both talking about how intimidated we were. Like, we felt so intimidated by each other, but we didn't know that at the time. And I think kind of talking about it with your tude partner is really helpful in kind of managing expectations and realizing that everyone is going through what you're going through.
So you're the first third year student we've also had on this channel, and we will get back to talking a bit more about that, I guess, what tutorials are like, what the workload is like in a bit. But can you tell us a bit about how you felt that change from first year to second year to third year? Firstly, I'm quite curious about what it would be like in third year, but also I'm sure people will be interesting to note how that kind of mindset changes throughout your time at Oxford.
Yeah, it's definitely not the rule, but I think it also largely depends on what papers you're doing. I'm studying history, and I'm interested in modern European history, and I've decided that will be the case before coming to Oxford. But up until year one, the extent of modern history I could do was the 19th century. But I know, and I knew at the time, that I'm a 20th century historian. So even though I was doing modern history, I was still not doing the modern history I was interested in. And obviously, I was taking other papers, and it was really hard for me because I had a lot of depth in 20th century European history, but I didn't really have anything else. And I had to build that from scratch. And I remember, the first paper I ever did at Oxford, it was British early modern history. And a lot of British students are taught those things at school. So they have kind of a solid foundation, a general who is who, basic names. I had no idea. I didn't know who Henry VIII was, which is embarrassing. But I didn't know. I never took an interest in early modern history. I never took an interest in British history up until kind of modern history, and I was lost. I didn't know how to do things. I attended a lot of webinars by the Central University, by our library, but this is a lot of theory. Yes, this is how you're meant to do things, but when it comes to practice, I don't have the time because I have to do an essay every week. I don't have the time to plan and do this and that, or I thought I didn't have the time. I was really lost in first year, and I also felt that it kind of forbade me from going out there and doing more activities that I wanted to do. As I've said, I wanted to do debate. I just didn't feel that I have the time because I always prioritized academics. But then kind of revising for exams in first year and going back to papers I've done, 1 or 2 terms ago, it helped me. I was able to, put things together and kind of understand a little bit better what I should have done differently. And I think, making mistakes in my academic preparation and my studies was an important and formative experience in not repeating them and, recognize that they weren't mistakes. That was first year, and I was quite satisfied with my performance in my first academic exams, but I felt that, you've started realizing what you're meant to do. Year 2, you really need to kind of make sure that you have it. And I was very fortunate enough that year 2 is like papers that I've enjoyed the most, and it was everything I was interested in: modern European history and especially the Soviet Union, except one paper which I felt was a big challenge for me. But even with that, which was a Trinity term, which is our summer term, that was a medieval British history paper, and I was so intimidated, and I was like, oh my god, I know nothing. and I'm not going to have enough time to build that foundation and kind of look at the historical debates, etc. And I told my personal tutor, I told my who is modern historian, and we're quite close. He was my supervisor as well, and I told him I really don't know what to do. And he's like, okay, here are some resources for some background, and will you like to have a chat with this DPhil student who is a DPhil student in medieval British studies? And we did that, and I had like 2 1-hour chat sessions with him, and he really helped me to kind of gain a lot of direction and kind of understand how to tackle the paper when the time come. And even though I was doing something that I didn't really enjoy, I ended up enjoying it, if it makes sense. I really liked it. And I felt that it was a really formative experience going into third year. And, now I feel a bit more confident. I know how to do things. I just have to put in the work, put in the revision hours and everything. But I will say, kind of summarizing from first year to third year, what really changed is that I made those mistakes and I recognized that there were mistakes and I hopefully corrected them.
So you've talked a lot about kind of the studying in Oxford, and that's something which we'll now talk a bit more about. Let's start off with tutorials, because everyone thinks about tutorials as kind of this unique aspect of an Oxford education. What are tutorials like, and how do they work as a history student?
Yeah, so it depends on the tutor, but usually you have a set tutor partner or more. So it varies between 2 people to no people. I've had some tutorials where it was just me, which I really enjoyed, to be honest. And basically, you get certain topics. It depends again on the tutor, but you can kind of say which topics you're interested in doing, because obviously you can't really go into great depth. And you have to write an essay before the tutorial on that topic, which is kind of very specialized and very niche. But in the tutorial, you either talk about the topic in general or you talk about your essay. Again, it depends on the tutor. And it's not so much as a lecture where the tutor sits down and gives you kind of the information you noted down. That's it. It's more of a debate. It's more of an argumentative discussion. So you are asked to defend your thesis argument, what you argued basically in your essay. And your tutor might bring in a counterpoint, and when presented with additional information, you can still argue for your case or kind of change your mind. It's really much about an argumentative discussion on a certain topic.
So you've talked a bit about, I guess, feeling intimidated by the tutor partner, or in sometimes people get intimidated by the tutor themselves because there might be a leading scholar in a certain field. How are some ways in which you overcome that?
Yeah, I think if you really go with the mentality that your tutor partner is not a competitor, is the way to go. You can learn a lot from each other, and frankly, it's. I think people who go in with the mentality that their tutor partner is their competitor or their rival, they have their energy and they're focused in their own place, and they're gonna kind of miss out on the big picture. And yeah, I've been quite very intimidated by my tutors, in the sense that not because they were mean or anything. I've had fantastic tutors, but because there were big names in the field. But I think if you see their energy and that they really treat you as an equal, that's one thing that I really appreciate. Is and you should be a little bit intimidated, because it means that you realize who that person is, what they've done, and you appreciate it. But when you experience their energy and the way they treat you, I think that kind of goes away.
Yes, no, that's definitely something which is kind of unique coming to Oxford, because going to in high school, I'll always be like talking to teach like Mr. so and so, whatnot. But then in Oxford, most tutors prefer to be called by their first name basis.
Yeah,
So I was kind of getting used to be like, "Hey Jordan, how are you?" And I was like,
exactly.
"Yeah, that doesn't seem very right," but it kind of is the way they want to be addressed. But on the topic of tutors, you talk about how you have a very good relationship with some of them. How do you develop that relationship with a tutor? Because that could be something which people might want to get closer to the tutor, because that's, I guess, what the whole Oxford experience is you have that one-to-one contact. How do you develop that?
I think you can take a lot of initiative. I mean, as a fresher, as a first year student, I didn't really. I only started doing that in year two, but I knew what I liked, so I there was a specific professor which I kind of admired, and I I've been following his work since I was in high school, and he was my interviewer. So I really knew that I will benefit a lot by having a closer relationship with him. And even though he wasn't my personal tutor, which are basically kind of people uh, doing your subject, teaching your subject, but not necessarily teaching you. It could be, but may not, who are in charge of your welfare, your well-being, and you have checkups every term. And even though I was quite close with my personal tutor, the other tutor I'm talking about, I kind of I emailed him and I was like, I really kind of like to talk to you about my thesis and about kind of other topics I'm interested in. And he was like, yes, let's meet on this day. And he ended up being my thesis supervisor. I I have a great relationship with him. He kind of I can say he gives me great advice, and I was applying for masters, so I had his support for that as well. So I think it's a lot about taking that initiative and putting yourself out there, just like I said, because the tutors appreciate that. If you know what you want to do, or if you're still exploring and you want to hear more about their research or their field, that's fantastic. On the other side, every college has subject societies, and our history society is really trying at Balliol is really trying to kind of cultivate a very close knit community, both like amongst the history students, but also between the tutors and the students. So I think sometime in April we'll have this kind of it's an informal workshop where the tutors will present and talk to us about their current research, and we get to hear firsthand what they're working on and kind of talk about it over some drinks. It's really informal, and you really get the opportunity to take initiative and talk with your tutors.
Now, one thing that you've raised is your dissertation, your thesis, and you're not only doing one thesis, you're doing two theses. And I was wondering, can you share a bit about what it's like writing a thesis, and the process which goes into it?
Yeah, definitely. So for context, I had two research interests, and I really couldn't decide. And I knew that I'm really passionate about research, so that's why I chose to do. And one is completed and submitted, but the other one I'm still working on it. So you have the flexibility, like from the central university in the countries that you have two separate deadlines, so they don't expect you to write them at the same time, or what you can't. So I think the number one thing about writing a thesis is creating and following and reviewing a realistic deadline, timeline, sorry. So it's all about laying out all the tasks you have to do, because I think writing is a small component. A large component is identifying the sources, finding the sources, reading the sources, analyzing the sources, reading the secondary material, and then you write. Writing, if you think that you can write an essay in a day, you can write a thesis in a week. You shouldn't, but you can't. It's not, it's a small part of the process. I think I think your timeline should reflect that a large component is about understanding your material and kind of finding the right material, just because you need to have an argument that is stemming primarily from the material, the primary material that is, and not replicating what other historians are saying. And I have developed this strategy, which might not work for everyone, where I read and analyze the primary material, and then I write my thesis, and then I go back, look at my notes on the secondary material, and I add things I want. Obviously, I have at the back of my mind the debates, but I want the first draft of my thesis to kind of reflect what I'm getting through the primary material. When I told one of my tutors that this is what I'm doing, he was horrified. He was like, no. But my supervisor knew that it worked really well, because the topic I was working on for my first thesis, it didn't really have a historical debate. So he said, you know what? It makes sense. Do it. And that's what I did. And I kind of felt that I can also use it for my second one, but I needed to kind of write on a piece of paper the main academic debate and like stick it on the wall, and so that I can remember it. But and I think you need to be realistic in your timeline. I've created the first drafts of the timelines I've created were completely unrealistic. It was like, I'm not a robot. Some days you wake up and you can write something good. But sometimes when it's not a writing day, it's a reading day. And you need to accept that and not like feel guilty about it. Because you're gonna wake up in 3 days and you're gonna feel, okay, today I'm gonna write, and I'm gonna write something that is presentable.
Now, one interesting thing you talk about sources and looking for sources. Sometimes I do a bit of research on the side, and one thing I notice is I read one source and then I come across, especially if you're using Solo or JSTOR, it says recommended readings, and you have a list of more, and then you read somewhere, and then there's another list, and you continue going on, and you go down a rabbit hole of just infinite sources that you're reading. How do you kind of balance that? I guess I want to learn more about what's actually being said about here, and then on the other hand, just going completely crazy and then your reading this goes from like 5 articles to like 20 articles very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, my thesis is 12,000 words, including footnotes. So I know from experience that that's not a lot, and I can't say a lot. And the thesis is not about a secondary analysis, that's an essay, It's I knew that obviously in the introduction I should set out the main debate, and that's where I start. If I read more, I just good, but I just want to make sure that I have the main debate down. The key historians, key arguments, because a historian might write 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 articles, kind of deviating on the same topic. I'm gonna choose the best one. The academic community has decided that that's their best work on, the Cultural Revolution in the Soviet Union, and I'm gonna focus on that, because they don't really expect you to survey the whole historiography. They want you to be aware of the debates, but it's more about what you contribute to those debates. So 80% primary analysis, and it's in the introduction where you set out the debate, and that's it. And a little bit here and there in the main body as you're analyzing, but you need to be comparative in that case. So do not waste your energy on reading and reading and reading. Be aware of the main debate, but anything else on top of that, you can't really show that you've done it, except if you just list it in the bibliography, but you can't really show that tangibly.
Yes. Now, we've talked a bit about dissertations, but some people might not end up actually writing any dissertations at the end of the day in Oxford. Alternatively, there are essays which everyone writes, I guess, whether they're a history student or not, everyone writes an essay. I was wondering how much of that approach that you've talked about that you have towards a dissertation applies to essays. How do they differ, and how do you go around writing an essay?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main difference is that you have to do what you are doing in, 2-3 months, you have to do in a week. So usually in Oxford, you have an essay a week. But the thing is the same. You usually are given the question, so you don't have to identify your topic as you do in your dissertation. But you are breaking down the topic into sub-questions, and that's usually when you define your key terms and kind of want to look at the implications of each key term. What is the meaning of resistance? What is the meaning of conformity? You need to kind of define in your introduction. In your introduction, I think it's my favorite thing to write everywhere, because I can really kind of understand what I'm writing by writing the introduction and kind of editing. Because let's say you're writing an essay on youth in the Soviet Union and kind of their attitudes to the regime, and you define who is youth, who am I including, and am I looking at different social groups, let's say urban youth, rural youth. You can really choose, and you are advised to really narrow down the terms of the debate that you're looking at, because they know that you're not expected to write an overview of the whole topic. You're really expected to make an argument through your essay. So the same quality applies in that you really need to get an argument through with both your essay and your dissertation. I think the main difference is that obviously in the essay you're looking at the historical debates and you're making the argument, but the dissertation is more based on the primary material. And obviously you need to have the historical arguments at the back of your mind. So that affects the analysis in the main body. In your main body, you usually, I usually adopt a thematic approach. I look at, like, say, 3-4 themes, and I present the debate on each, each theme, and then I say what I believe. And I usually try to, differentiate myself slightly from what is currently said, because I think it's a much stronger argument to say, this person is right because of this, and say something different, rather than, replicate what they're saying exactly. And, in the context of being specific, let's say the youth question, some of the themes that someone can look at is social mobility and how they felt about social mobility, the benefits, the Komsomol, which was the organization of the regime, and whether they participated or not, how they participated, did they just attend or were they enthusiastic? And you can bring some primary evidence. It depends on the scope of the paper you're doing, and education and the family. Some people are really interested in gender, and they might have that section. Some people are interested in religion, and you can really go into many different themes and directions. And the more specific and niche you are, the better, because they know that you don't have to do an overview.
Now, we've talked a bit about the essays, the tutorials, and your dissertation. Now, we haven't really discussed lectures yet, and there's always a very interesting thing between everyone at Oxford, where lectures are one of those questionable realities. What are history lectures like?
Well, I don't know, because I do not attend them. I think I've only attended a few in the first term, like 3 or something, because they're online as well. Most of them. But the issue I have with lectures is that they are very introductory. I like lecture handouts, and they usually upload them, and I use those as a kind of recommended reading. So what is important, what is not. but I feel that I can get the same foundation by, watching a video or something
Mm,
and just delving into the reading that my tutor recommends, rather than attending it. Like that's my personal opinion, just
mm,
because I feel that they're very introductory and they're not going to help me write an essay in the context that the essay needs to be very specific.
mm,
But now that I'm revising for finals, I'm looking at some of the recordings as
mm.
kind of, I can clean my room and like listen to the
Yeah.
lecture in the background, sort of thing.
Mm,
Uh, and in that context, they are helpful. But, for the overview papers, they're a bit too general for me and I can't really use them.
mm. Now, moving on from, I guess, the strictly history-related subjects, we talked a bit about you learning Russian in the past. Now, the viewer might be looking at it. Someone goes to Oxford, studies history, and all of a sudden they can learn a language as well. Can you tell us a bit more about, I guess, the language program at Oxford and how you get to study Russian?
Yeah, of course. So this is available to every student, and we have the language center, and there are a number of languages. They have Spanish, they have Chinese, they have Japanese, Greek, Italian, German, and Russian. I think that's all. And you can actually get funding from your college to attend those lessons, and there are different streams. It depends your level of knowledge and how fast you want to learn. You can take 1 or 2 lessons a week, it depends. And the professors are really good, and you can kind of focus on what skill you want to develop the most. I wanted to develop my reading skills, so I talked with my teacher, and we kind of said, yes, that's what we're going to do. Because there are not a lot of students. I think I haven't been in a class of more than 5 people, and but the history faculty has developed extra lessons that I think second year students can attend just for Russian. So I attended both, and I was able to kind of really develop my reading because the faculty classes were 80% reading, so I could really kind of develop my reading skills. And Russian is a hard language, and if you take large breaks, over the summer, over winter breaks, spring break, where you don't use the language, I'm having difficulties kind of balancing that. But I did manage to read 6 diaries in Russian for my dissertation, so I thought that what, that's that's where I wanted to be.
Hmm, that sounds like a very worthwhile thing. I mean, if I had more time, I perhaps should also learn Russian as well. I quite like reading Dostoevsky, and I do quite a lot of research in that. So that's definitely something that I should keep my eyes on. But I suppose moving towards life at Oxford and what it's like in general, can you tell us a bit more about the JCR community at Balliol? Do you take part in it? How do you find it? What's that like?
Sure. So the JCR is a junior common room, and it refers both to the physical room but also the undergraduate body. And we have a committee which is elected, and basically there are different roles. There are women's officers, the president, secretary, treasurer, sports officers, ethnic minority officers. Um, I was actually the academic affairs and careers officer for a bit, and I was responsible for um, informing the Balliol undergraduate community about certain opportunities, like job opportunities or career development related sessions of the career service. And it's a nice way to get involved and develop your own projects that are gonna impact the community. But it's also a nice way to meet people, because we had weekly meetings um, in Balliol, which are not necessarily in your subject group or which are not in your year group. I met some fantastic people, and so it really depends on the level of responsibility you want to have. If you're the president, obviously you're going to have much more responsibility, but it can be very low commitment and very flexible.
That sounds very interesting. But I suppose I'm personally not part of the JCR, and I don't do much around the JCR at all. In fact, I was in the common room a few weeks back, and my friend said, "Is this the first time you've been in the JCR the whole Hillary?" I was like, "Yeah, I've not been here the whole term." And but I do a lot of things outside of the JCR. Can you tell us a bit more about what other things you are doing now, or what things you have done in the past? Because I remember the last interview we did with you that you were wearing a sports kit. So can you tell us a bit more about other things as well?
So I what how would I be doing? Well, I was doing debate in second year, and I attended a few competitions with our Oxford Union debating team, and I found that really fun, really challenging because everyone is really good at what they're doing, so it's hard, but you get to represent the university, so it's a very nice opportunity. And if you don't want to do it competitively, there's the option of just attending practice. So again, it is a supportive community, and it really much depends on what you want to do. And I was doing a lot of volunteering with that was in first year. I was tutoring Oxfordshire-based high school students. So I think I did geography A level, which was a bit of a challenge because I had to remind myself of a lot of things. I've been working for Zero Gravity. That is kind of a UK program, so it's not really Oxford based, and mentoring some students that are applying to university. And a large part of my second year was the ball, our commemorative ball. So even though it's not JCR, it's still college based, and it was a bit of a challenge, but I think we did a good job. We worked on the ball for 1 year because it was a big celebration, and something I do kind of much more low commitment is I attend some career related events. I'm still trying to figure things out, so I'm attending a number of skills development workshops, or kind of employers coming to Oxford, and the career service is doing a fantastic job, and certain societies are doing great jobs. I'm not in the societies like in leadership role because I just don't have the time, but I do attend a lot of their events. It really broadens your horizon, and there's so many opportunities to do things in Oxford.
That sounds wonderful. No, I probably should go check out a bit more stuff offered by the Career Society. All I get from them is an email each week saying, "Oh, would you be interested in working at Manchester United as a football analysis?" And I'm like, that actually looks pretty cool. But that's all I get from them so far. So I should go check them out a bit more. To wrap off this interview, what is the craziest thing that has happened to you since getting into Oxford?
I think I've become very independent because I grew up in a very protective household, and I don't think I had a lot of responsibility over myself. My friends have a lot of funny and embarrassing stories about things I couldn't do by myself, but I'm not gonna say them because it's really embarrassing. I think the only thing I'm gonna say is like I couldn't take the train. I didn't know how to take the train. In my defense, we don't have public transport, functioning public transport in Cyprus, so I just didn't know that in order to go to a certain place, like the train will write the final destination, and that's okay. I thought I was like missing the train, so I was like, where are they? Or like the first time I flew home, instead of going to the airport, I was going to Cambridge. I don't know how. I still don't know how I made it to the airport, but I did. So I think it's becoming more independent. It's the people, it's the lifestyle, it's the academic path as well. They really kind of helped me take ownership over my life and realize that, there's much more to life than studying. There's also kind of taking care of yourself. So I'm really grateful for that.
Wonderful. That's a very beautiful answer to end off this video. Thank you very much for watching this interview with Penny. I'm sure you learned a lot. Let me know who else or what other subjects you want to learn more about in the comments below. Or if you have any questions about history or just Oxford in general, let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, see you soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. I'll see you next one.